Dan Illman, Mike Beer, getting set for the Grade 1, $1 million Saratoga Derby. We're going 1 3/16 miles on the Mellon turf course. Let's take a look at this field of three-year-olds, many of which competed in the Belmont Derby in their most recent start. That race was won in gate-to-wire fashion by long shot Classic Causeway, who is making his turf debut. Classic Causeway is back in here, but the lead might not be as easy for him to grab this time around.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to be. Pulled off a pretty big upset in his turf debut last time in a pretty big race, too. If nothing else, Dan, that Belmont Derby bears some watching, because I think if anybody went back and sort of went through that replay carefully, you'd find horses in that race that you might want a little bit more than you wanted Classic Causeway back in this spot.
Now, when you play this race with your DRF Bets account, you get free Formulator past performances. You click on the short comment link in those past performances, the video will pop up and you can watch the race and make your trip notes. Let's throw up the Timeform US Pace Projector. One of the big stories in the Belmont Derby was that Emmanuel wasn't able to participate, and he was expected to make the lead in that race. When he was taken out, that gave Classic Causeway the lead. Well, Emmanuel is here this time, and not only is he here, but Main Event is a horse that likes to go to the front, and personally, I think Jose Ortiz is sending Main Event, and he's going to make the lead.
Yeah, I think he's going to go too. We'll see how everybody else decides to play. I get that Emmanuel has some speed as well, and he did wire the Pennine Ridge in his turf debut, but that wasn't a particularly fast pace. And he doesn't seem like a horse to me who absolutely has to be on the lead. The real problem for anybody who has designs on going to the front here happens to be Classic Causeway again, Dan. I know that pace wasn't that fast in the Belmont Derby, but this is a fast horse, and he's kind of has a one-way running style.
And he also has a lot of quality, as he's shown on dirt early in his career. Not easy to win a Grade 1 in your first race on a new surface, and that's exactly what he did in the Belmont Derby. Let's begin the analysis with Main Event. And Main Event's a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde horse. I talked to his trainer, George Weaver, before the Kent, and he said he overthought things in his prior race, the American Turf at Churchill Downs, where he said he told Jose Ortiz, take him back off of the pace. I don't want to be on the lead, and it didn't work out. That's not what Main Event wants to do. That's Mr. Hyde. Here's Dr. Jekyll, however, in the Kent. Weaver said, we're certainly not doing that again, and he put Main Event right on the front. A couple of horses tried to go with him. They couldn't. He opened up at just the right time with a nice acceleration on the second turn, and he holds everybody at bay.
Yeah, easy win here. I liked some of this horse's prior races, on turf down at Gulfstream over the winter. I thought he had run well in some of those. I didn't think he ran as well in any of those as he did in that Kent, though. I was pretty taken with that performance. I thought he ran really well there. And it sort of made me interested in him in this race. The more I went through the field, Dan, and once you get to the outside, you start realizing how tough this race actually is. And I don't think it's going to be easy for this horse to wire this field, but I do think he's pretty good. There might be a pretty good race with his name on it down the line.
It is a huge step up in class, to be sure. All three of his wins have come when he is able to make the lead at the pace call. His losses have when he has been unable to make the lead, and that could be key, the first quarter mile. Grand Sonata is the number 2. This horse ran 4th in the Belmont Derby, only beaten a length at a big price. It was a really nice effort for the Todd Pletcher trainee, a horse that showed a lot more tactical speed than he did in the Audubon 2 starts back at Churchill Downs, a course that maybe he didn't handle or didn't seem to handle until late in the game.
Yeah, he did. And he also had a little trouble at the start of that race. He didn't break short. He got bumped between horses. He just wound up way back out of position in there. And a performance that actually isn't as bad as it looks on paper. He was one of, a bunch of horses that got beat, a length or a length and a half in that Belmont Derby. There were a bunch of horses around at the end trying to catch Classic Causeway. But this horse just showed up with another rock solid performance, Dan. That's what he does. He's really underrated. He did get one of the better trips in that Belmont Derby, but he just showed up and he ran again, and he showed that distance is no problem for him. I happen to be a big fan of his, and I thought he was mildly interesting at a really big price in the Belmont Derby. I don't think you're going to get that big a price this time, but he's still going to be fair value in here, and he can get another piece of this race.
He will be fair value. He is as honest as the day is long and tactical enough to work out a really nice trip just off of the leaders. The three is Emmanuel, also trained by Pletcher, and this horse was on some people's Kentucky Derby lists earlier this year after two impressive races on the main track. Well, he made his turf debut in the aforementioned Pennine Ridge. Let's watch that race. And Mike, you talked about it. The pace was very, very slow. He got away with a half in 51 and 3, three quarters in 15 and 4, and he sprints on home to win. This horse has always had some buzz around him. He does have a little bit of early speed, and I think he's going to improve. I wonder how much missing the Belmont Derby will affect him one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, I guess we'll see. There are certainly things to like about him, Dan. He has talent. He's got speed. He's got pedigree. Obviously, a really good trainer in his corner, too. He's just a really good horse. We picked up that replay of the Pennine Ridge, though, after everybody had sort of swung on him in the stretch there, and he had plenty left to hold them off. What we didn't show you is that he just walked early. He had that whole field single file behind him at the backstretch with nobody doing anything. And it just feels like he really took advantage in that race. He still ran well, and I have a feeling that he's going to turn out to be an okay turf horse down the line, but I'm not betting him back off of the Pennine Ridge.
The number 4, Nation's Pride, goes out for trainer Charlie Appleby and Godolphin. And if you recall, Appleby had a year to remember in 2021 in North America, certainly Breeders' Cup races, Saratoga Grade 1s, etc. Nation's Pride won a little stakes race, the Newmarket, 3 starts back. Couldn't have won that race any easier. He got right up close in a short field and blew them out in the stretch. He's one of those trip horses in the Belmont Derby. I wonder if Frankie Dettori was kind of bringing his rivalry with Ryan Moore across the ocean, because it seemed like he had this horse in a decent spot on the outside going into the second turn, and he kind of dropped in. It almost looked like he wanted to keep Ryan Moore and Stone Age locked in down towards the inside, and then he got forced out and still came with a run. It was a good effort for Nation's Pride.
It was a good effort, and you're right. The trip just didn't really work out that well for him, and I'm not so sure that it was because he had any kind of real trouble in the race. And maybe you're right, Dan. Maybe it was just a little bit of gamesmanship from his rider there. He still ran well, and he made up a lot of ground through the stretch to come up just short. He came over in good form. His Epsom Derby wasn't that good, a race where he just really couldn't make any headway from off the pace, and he was just nowhere at the end. But prior to that, he was in really good form. His 3 wins at 1.25 miles, he really finished those races off impressively. 2 of those were in 4-horse fields, though. I mean, I think he still has a lot to prove. I also feel like he's pretty good.
I think he proved in the Belmont Derby that he certainly belongs with these kind of horses, and I think he's a true 9.5, 10 furlong horse. Maybe the Epsom Derby at 1 mile, just a little bit too far against maybe too tough a competition. Stolen Base won the American Turf at Churchill Downs 2 starts back, coming from off of the pace. He just didn't fire in the Belmont Derby for one reason or another. If Michael Maker decides to run here, he has him cross-entered in the Hall of Fame at a shorter distance on Friday. He's got a lot to prove.
Yeah, he really does. I mean, he's one of the horses that didn't really seem to have a huge excuse in the Belmont Derby, and he just didn't run well at all. So to me, that makes him really hard to take back if this is the race that Maker decides to run him in. On the other hand, I guess if Maker does decide to run him here, maybe he does have an excuse for that Belmont Derby.
Annapolis ticks a lot of boxes for trainer Todd Pletcher. 5-2 on the morning line. Arad Ortiz takes the mount. He has a lovely pedigree. He's basically undefeated in his career. If you want to draw a line through that 10 mile, I think you could. It was on a boggier than boggy turf course, and he still tried very hard to finish second. He'll never run on a course that soft again in his life. He bounced out of that race with a nice win in the Manila last time out. Let's watch this race. Arad had him down inside early, bulls his way to the outside, and polishes off this field with a minimum of fuss and a respectable 91 buyer speed figure. And now it's all about, can he sustain this stretching out to 1 mile and 3/16?
Yeah, that's the question. You can't question this horse's talent, though. He's run well in all of his races. You mentioned the excuses for the race off the long layoff in the Penn Mile. This was that right there that we just watched. I mean, no, that's how you redeem yourself. He got a good trip in that race, but he just powered away from that field really impressively. He was really good in both starts as a 2-year-old as well. Feels like he hasn't really lost anything despite having to miss the Breeders' Cup. This horse is going to be very tough in here if he can stretch out.
There are several horses in this race that have extensive European form, and the horse likely to be the biggest price of all of them on Saturday is the number 7 Royal Patronage, a group winner as a 2-year-old, coming off of 5th in the Belmont Derby. And this horse showed somewhat surprising speed in that race, Mike. When we think of these European horses, you think they're a little bit dull coming out of the gate. Not so with Royal Patronage. He was sharp under Joel Rosario. Joel retains the mount here.
Yeah, I think they'll probably try to get him a little more settled this time. He was like that over there in some of the races. They kept him up close to the pace over in Europe. When they ran him in that Epsom Derby too, he got right up close and just got totally overwhelmed by that field. He was just no match in that race. It was very strange to see him go so aggressively early in that race last time. He kept right up with the winner around the first turn. Rosario finally got the horse to back off a little bit. And you know what, Dan? After that, he didn't run that poorly. It's not like he lost a ton of ground in that race. Obviously, the winner just kept going. So it's not like Royal Patrons being up close to the pace has some kind of big excuse, but he still ran pretty well in that race.
Conversely, the 8-side dog has no early speed. This is a one-run closer that seemingly is always at the mercy of race and trip luck. He won his first 3 starts, and he showed a strong kick in all of those races. Now, maybe he didn't care for that turf course at Churchill when he was the beaten favorite in the American turf. We know that course has had all sorts of problems. In the Belmont Derby, kind of an even performance, again, sort of from the back of the pack.
Yeah, he was off it. A bunch of horses were closing. He was one of them. Man, also, that trip just kind of really worked out for Manny Franco, though, I thought, Dan. He got to save a lot of ground in that race. He just kept improving his position, and nobody got in his way. He even had room all through the stretch as he was just racing on along with everybody else. I mean, I thought he ran fine, but he wasn't one of the horses out of that Belmont Derby that I wanted back in this race.
Even though the number 9 Classic Causeway was well beaten in both the Florida Derby and Kentucky Derby, he brings a pretty strong resume to this race. A multiple graded stakes winner this year on dirt. He swept both of the major Kentucky Derby preps at Tampa Bay Downs, and then here's what he did in the Belmont Derby. Julian Leparoux is so great when he gets a horse on the lead and relaxed, and he gave this horse a lovely breather on the backstretch. And Classic Causeway shows a lot of class and determination. You see the 2 European horses on the far outside is Nation's Pride. 1 to his inside is Stone Age, and they just can't get to Classic Causeway, who keeps grinding it out.
Yeah, everybody was getting to him late, but it was too late. He had too big of an advantage in here. It looked like, maybe he was going to be in trouble there early when Royal Patronage came after him. But once that horse backed off, this horse just almost switched off up the backstretch, Dan. He just really came to hand. He didn't go fast. He was still going really well around that final turn, and he had just enough left to hold him off. I'll give him all the credit he deserves for pulling off that big upset. I'm not betting him back in this race.
One of the more impressive Epsom Derby preps in 2022 came from the 10 Stone Age. That was in the Derby trial in Ireland in Leopardstown. And in that race, Stone Age showed good speed. He basically made all the running that day, and he pounded that field over a left-handed turf course that's reminiscent of a lot of North American courses. Now, he drew a terrible post position in the Belmont Derby, post 12. And Ryan Moore did everything he could to get this horse down on the inside, relaxed and save ground on the back stretch, and he got in very, very tight entering the second turn. Then he got to the outside, sort of forced the other European horse Nations wide outside. He was pretty game in between horses. I think the race, some people were disappointed he didn't win. You always expect the Europeans to win these races. I thought he ran very well.
Yeah, I thought both he and Nation's Pride ran very well too. And I know that there were a few different trips in that race. It feels like Nation's Pride's trip is sort of getting most of the attention. I hated the trip that this horse got in that race. As you've already mentioned, Dan, this horse was good at 2. He came back at 3, and he felt like an improved horse this year, and he felt like an improved horse going right to the front. Both of those wins off the layoff, they just put him right on the lead, and he drilled those fields very strongly through the stretch. When you go back and watch the replay of that Belmont Derby, I know he had the far outside post. Ryan Moore had the chance to go forward in that race. And it looked like first time through the stretch, he thought about it for a second, and then he didn't go. He took this horse back, and he was never in position again to really win that race. I feel like he ran really well last time.
Ethereal Road completes the field. Now he's going to try to pull off the Classic Causeway trip. This will be his first start on the turf, a horse that won the Sir Barton, but will probably always go down in history as the horse that scratched out of the Kentucky Derby and allowed Rich Strike to get in to pull off the huge upset. I guess there's a little bit of turf pedigree here, Mike. He's got a little war front on the bottom.
Yeah, he does have turf pedigree. The Quality Roads can do anything. The Dam won twice in her career, both on the grass. She was grade 3 placed. This horse's only sibling so far has turned aside, a really good turf sprinter. So there's turf pedigree here. I don't know if he's going to be able to stack up with these horses, but it's not like they're just, it's like a wing and a prayer here. This horse is bred for grass.
And somewhat of an unfortunate outside post position. I think Louis Saez just basically has to just take this horse back and hope to make one run, hopefully following some live cover on the final turn. Let's take a look at our top selections for the Saratoga Derby. It's a wide open race. Stone Age, I thought, did not have the easiest trip last time out. I don't think he liked being down inside. It looked like he took sort of an awkward step down on the rail in the second turn before he swung to the outside and then was sort of herded in between horses. I think if he runs back to that Derby trial, he's going to be very, very strong. You want to see Johnny V get him closer?
Yeah, I want to see them try to go forward this time. Like I said, they could have done it in the Belmont Derby and they didn't. I have to give this horse one more chance in here. I know he's outside again. I don't think it's a big deal. There's a long run through the stretch the first time to give this horse a chance to get over. And I just like the way he came back as a 3-0. I have to give him a chance to rebound here.
The way Weaver was talking before the Kent, it was almost as if you'll never see main event behind another horse in his career. He just feels that he's a different animal when he gets to the lead. And I wonder if Classic Causeway is going to be a little bit overconfident, the connection, saying we can beat main event and take him whenever we want him. Maybe we don't want to get involved in a pace duel going a long distance like that. He's going to be 20-1. I think he can get to the front. And I liked his last race, the Kent, but it is a big ask in a wide open edition of the Saratoga Derby. 10-4, 6-7 for Mike. 1-4, 10-6 for me. Best of luck.